In our first community conversation, we're joined by Lisa Wise Chapman from Sentara Martha Jefferson's Wound Healing Center. She's sitting down with Aaron.
Lisa, so good to see you again. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So we're continuing our conversation from last time, talking about June being Wound Healing Awareness Month. So why is it important for people to understand that wound care is a process, not just covering it with a Band-Aid?
Sure. For many people, cuts and sores naturally heal on their own after a short period of time. However, in some cases, there are wounds that fail to heal properly on their own, and this can lead to higher health care costs, extended hospitalization, and potentially medical complications that are dangerous.
Right. And so you guys teach the 7 steps to wound management. So
Sure.
can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. So the first being blood flow, because of course blood takes oxygen and other nutrients to the wound. The second is treating an infection. Of course, infections help to delay healing, and so we want to prevent those as much as possible and determine if there is one. Debridement is the third step, and that's how we cleanse the wound. Typically remove any bacteria and any dead skin with the use of a scalpel or instrument like that. We recommend that weekly to take place. The next step is nutrition and blood sugar control. To help wounds heal, you need to increase your protein intake as well as vitamins. And if you have elevated blood sugars, it's important to take medication as directed so that you can steady your blood sugar levels. The fifth step is offloading, which is basically taking pressure off of the wound. The sixth step is wound care dressings. Having the right dressing determines how quickly a wound will heal. Right. And the seventh step is advanced treatments, because sometimes wounds need some extra help in healing, such as hyperbaric oxygen therapy and skin substitutes.
All right, so those are the 7 steps to wound management. Good to keep those in mind. And which of those steps do people most commonly miss or underestimate?
Probably ignoring the steps, ignoring signs of infection and improper or inadequate wound dressing.
And then what's your advice for someone whose wound doesn't seem to be healing? When should they seek specialized care?
Sure. For those at risk, even the simplest of wounds can become serious or have complications, have significant problems. Underlying conditions such as diabetes, obesity, poor circulation, or impaired immune system can contribute greatly to delaying the healing of a wound. And so reaching out to us at the Sentara Wound Healing Center at Sentara Martha Jefferson Hospital is helpful. Our team can provide the specialized treatment necessary and some medical expertise also to help support the body's healing process, limit health complications, and speed recovery.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for coming in again. It was nice seeing you again.
Thank you, Erin. Appreciate it.
Anytime.